Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the 12th volume of the Songwriter Sessions here at Wilson Valley Mercantile. Today we're talking with Texas-based singer-songwriter Phil Hurley. Phil's career has spanned from the power pop of the Gigolo Ants to his Americana work with Stone Honey and to the South Austin Moonlighters. Now his compelling solo material like the EP The Firebird Sessions and his recent album Stay Gold. Also with us is our host for the Songwriter Roundup at Wilson Valley Mercantile. So thanks for joining us, Phil Ely. Well, howdy, Phil. Howdy, Ely. Thank y'all for joining me here today.
Yes, indeed.
We're recording this 12th volume of the Songwriter Sessions here for Wilson Valley Mercantile in anticipation for the upcoming Songwriter Roundup here, which Ely hosts, and Phil is the next guest. And that date is the 20th of...
My pleasure.
Tell us about what initially drew you to Austin, because you've been over and done a whole bunch of interesting things, and you came in 2009, something like that. You moved here.
I did move, yeah. So yeah, I've lived all around the country. I had by kind of pure misfortune ended up in Los Angeles for a while, and the only really good thing that came out of living out there is that I met some guys and we made a really good singing band called Stone Honey, and we had gotten a big record deal with a big name producer, as you know, things happen that way in LA. And he had it in his mind, he wanted us to move to Nashville, and he was going to foot the bill for us to move to Nashville. So we actually got in a van and started driving across country, and we stopped along the way in Austin and played one kind of uneventful show. But that same visit, we ended up meeting Graham Parsons' only child, Polly Parsons, and she fell in love with the band and took us to a party at a guy named Eddie Wilson's house. And Eddie owned Threadgills here in Austin back in the day, and he had owned the historic venue, the Armadillo World Headquarters back in the day. And so those guys just took us in like family. I mean, and so here we go, we're still moving to Nashville, but we're looking back over our shoulder going, what was that all about? So we did our time in Nashville. It wasn't really the right time for that band. It was very much a time where they were looking for solo artists, not groups. But we gave it the old college try and made a lot of friends, and I enjoyed my time there. But we kept hearing that call, boy, I think we're in the wrong place. And so sure enough, we regrouped and regathered and made Austin a move, and we ended up getting a record deal through Jimmy LaFave and his crew here in Austin, and made another record and made another run at it. And then, unfortunately, that band kind of fizzled out. And when it did, most of the guys left the area. But I found it to be fertile soil, so I stayed.
Yeah, well, there's a heck of a live music scene. Heck of a live music scene there in Austin. It kind of spills into the other areas here in Temple. You know, Salato's a small community. They've got a heck of a music scene around here too. So,
I'm seeing that all over. Actually, I'm a little distressed with the current state of Austin music. I think it's the waters are pretty muddied right now, but I'm really impressed with what I'm seeing. I just moved out to Bastrop, and Bastrop is thriving, or Lockhart, or Dripping Springs, or San Marcos. I think that the real music's getting made away from Austin right now. Austin's getting a little up its own butt. You know, it's and I'm not. I used to think of it as a songwriter town, and now I'm not hearing. It's like now it's becoming like a costume change town, and it's like I don't really care about your outfit. You know, what do you got to say? You know?
Sure.
That's a generalization. I know there's still good folks there, but it does feel like it's getting a little swayed by that kind of velvet rope, LA, Nashville, like insincerity, which when I first moved to Austin, I thought it was like, it's ace in the hole is that it was authentic and sincere. And I think that's in jeopardy.
I got you. Well, how, since you moved to Austin, how has that affected your sound, and what is, as far as that matter goes, talk about your core influences and how you got started and how it's changed since you moved to Austin?
Great question. I was definitely a rock and roll kid growing up. I grew up in way upstate New York, and if there was country music, I wasn't hearing it. I was into, I liked everything British. I loved, English punk rock and anything but. And when I had bands when I was young, we were very influenced by more English music, and I ended up signing an English deal first and spending a lot of time over there. And that was really my early influences. But then a couple of things happened. I was living in Boston, and I saw a couple of things that really kind of shook me up. I saw a group from Minneapolis that were opening for us called the Jayhawks, and I had never heard a sound like they made, and it really hit me. And then another time, I think I was only 19 years old, I saw a young band. They were 19-year-old too, and it was a band called Uncle Tupelo. And Uncle Tupelo were so weary. There was these young kids who sounded like they had just, wasted their life working at a factory, and yet it mixed like this, like the world weariness of country music with like the energy of punk rock. I started listening to that, and those bands for me were the gateway. And so everything for me with country came ass backwards. I heard those guys, and from that I found Graham Parsons, and from Graham I found Merle, and from Merle I found Hank, and from Hank I found so I had to go all backwards on it all. But certainly moving here and meeting guys like the first kind of cats we met were Jimmy LaFave, as I mentioned. I met the great pianist Earl Poole Ball, who would play with Johnny Cash, Red Volkert, and Bill Kirchen. So suddenly it was like the thing I loved about the elder statesmen of the scene here in Austin is not only were they magnificent musicians, but they were approachable. And they were all really accessible. If you said, "Hey, I'd love to sit down and pick with you sometime," they said, "Come on."
Yeah.
It was like it didn't have that. Not to harp on Los Angeles, but in LA, I remember going up to a real hero of mine as a guitar player. I won't mention a name, but I said, "Man, I would love to take a lesson with you sometime." And he said, "Got a million." Okay, I get it. So that's so just having access to cats like that, I think really, and I think that being around, and I had never really heard names like Guy Clark and Townes Van Zandt, and like those. So like those were new for me, and as a writer, I realized like, okay, I got to up my game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in a group, as I mentioned, that band Stone Honey. There were 4 writers in that band, and it was a healthy competition. All 4 of us were learning to our craft together. And if you came up with something you thought was good, the next day the next guy came up with something even better. So then you had to so we really had it was a rivalry, but it was a very friendly rivalry. But we
Sure.
all grew, and also suddenly we had a band that was good enough that if we had good ideas, they could really bring it to fruition. So I learned a lot playing with those guys.
Yes, sir. That sounds like it was a great experience, and
It was, yeah.
absolutely. Tell me about you're a pretty versatile session musician, and how does that play into your solo career as well?
I think that they all feed into each other. I play a lot of different instruments, and I find that I played drums helped me be a better bass player. As I got to be a better acoustic guitar player, it made me be a better rhythm electric guitar player. They all kind of feed into each other. So I love doing it. Like last night I was at Green Hall playing guitar for my friend Ted Russell Camp. Tonight I'm playing bass for my buddy Ben Zuniga. I think that it's just anytime you're using the muscles, you're strengthening. So it doesn't and I think also hearing how other people write and how other people approach chord changes and song structure. We each have our own idea in our imagination of where our songs are going to go, but making yourself, sit in somebody else's song and hear how they'd approach it. It's just vitamins. It's just, I'm not necessarily going to steal something hook, line, and sinker, but it might give me oh man, I remember Ben had this idea if he went to this chord or whatever, So I feel like I love doing my own stuff. I love having my own band, and I love doing solo stuff, but I feel like it just charges my batteries.
I got you. Well, more experience, more thought, more everything, more growth, really.
Yeah, and this is all I've ever done. I started playing in bands when I was 8 years old, and I got lucky enough that I've been able to make it my living for most of my adult life. And so I look forward to. I've got a session on tomorrow morning. I'm doing a session. I've never even heard the songs. I'm just going in. It's like, here we go. But I learned. Not to bring up his name over and over again, but playing with Jimmy LaFave was a real experience because Jimmy was an amazing songwriter, a very curious band leader. There was no rehearsals. He never sent us any music, and there was no set list. So you got on stage and he started a song, and you just had to, he'd play it through the first time so you could hear the chords. And by the second time through, you were supposed to play something appropriate, And so it was like great ear training. But the big takeaway I learned from Jimmy was, I don't care about notes. Find the feeling. What's the emotion we're trying to create? Can you add to it? Can you supplement? Can you augment the emotion of this? Because he was a very emotional writer. And I learned so much about the power of, a note instead of a lot of notes. It was like that one little thing that can make the song better, and playing for the sake of the song. So I've got the session tomorrow. I know the guy kind of said this one's kind of George Jones. This one's kind of, Dwight Yoakam. This one's kind of Hank Williams. Then I already know where to put my brain, and we'll go in. And I love that challenge, and I also love starting out the day with a blank page, and by the end you've written a novel together. That's
absolutely
a fun challenge.
My brain doesn't work that way quite that way. At least not musically, but that's awesome, and that's the kind of thing that I love seeing come together. Some of the folks who do play or have played our round up here at Wilson Valley, they've either been around each other some, or they're outstanding musicians, and they do a heck of a good job. And it's always awesome whenever you see. We actually do a songwriter Christmas roundup every
Oh,
December as a Toys for Tots toy drive, and usually the last round of the night is some of the more seasoned folks, and it's always amazing to hear what they've got to do or what they're going to do and how they play off of each other and play with each other, and it's
that's
just
where the
a whole
magic
lot of
starts
fun.
happening. If people, and I get it, people get pretty protective of their songs. So I've been on songwriter things where, other people have said, like, when I'm playing, nobody plays a note. It's like, okay, all right, hands off. But I always say, like, hey man, if you want to take a solo, or if you hear a harmony, or, like, because it's those interactions, is when you trust the other people around you to, put in their little stamp, that's where the magic starts to happen, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. That's what makes it fun, is when you hear the magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's see. You have a recent album out, Stay Gold. Is that pretty fresh?
That was from last year.
Last
Yeah.
year?
Yep. And I made a couple records, but they're both EPs, 5-song EPs. I had a good group going on here in Bastrop. They were all local guys. And I love going into a studio and having that whole experience. But I realized I have all this stuff. Like, I had bought a new digital mixer for my PA, and it had a USB out. And I realized, wait, what if I plug that USB out into my computer? And suddenly I realized I've got 18 channels. So why don't I just plug in my band and play? And so we
Mm-hmm.
went in all together and tracked everything live. And then I could bring things home and, overdub. I could put on vocals and harmonies and, acoustic guitars, whatever, and then give it to a professional to mix it. So I made my last two records just by myself. And they did well. Like, they both got on the Americana charts and got picked up by stations from coast to coast, and
Awesome.
did all right on the streaming service. It is, for someone who's been involved in music as long as I have, I got to admit, I'm pretty befuddled by what it takes to have success in this digital world. I love making music still, but I don't know the formula to get it out there and get it heard anymore. It's so challenging. It's such a competitive field, and I do it because I love it, but my aspirations are different these days.
We've had some similar conversations with folks to that, and
Yeah.
at least one was, if you really want to get it heard, then you got to pay somebody to play it.
I bumped into that really early on with these records. I realized, like, you can just, like, anybody who seems to be saying that they have all these spins or all these Instagram friends or views, you can just buy them.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. So if you had a budget, you could, you could just essentially, spend your way onto the charts. And I'm sure it's always been that way, but that's not me. That's not. First of all, I don't have enough money, but it's also, I think what people have said, and I think is true, is that what you gotta try to find in this world is your audience. If you can find
Yeah.
your 1,000 folks or 10,000 folks who really believe in you, you can service them. And at this point, I've been on major labels, and I've been on MTV, and I got to do Conan O'Brien and Saturday Night Live and all that stuff when I was young. My aspirations, like I said, are different now. I would love to just find, that little corner, or that little, little club that just, are curious about what I have to say. That would be enough for me these days.
I got you. Well, you mentioned your band a couple of times. Is that South Austin Moonshiners? Is that the current band, or
I did that band
no?
for 10 years, South Austin
Okay.
Moonlighters. And they are actually still going and making another record currently. I love those guys. I had a lot of fun playing with them. Around COVID, I was starting to write a bunch of new music that I was kind of realizing, you know what, I'm not sure this is for them. And I had been on the road with them. We worked hard. I mean, we were out doing 160, 180 dates a year, year after year after year after year, and just, and I was getting ready to get married, and just starting to think, man, maybe I don't need to be working as hard as that. So I tried as amicably as I could to depart with some on good terms. I'm not sure that they feel that way. I tried, but no. So I put together my own band just under my own name, Phil Hurley. And
Okay.
I really stepped in it at first because I had just moved from Austin out to this town of Bastrop. And if you've ever been to Bastrop, it's in this odd little pine forest, which is pretty rare for Texas.
Yep.
Everything out here, from the car dealership to the bank, everything kept saying Lost Pines, Lost Pines. So I thought, that's, my band were all Bastrop guys, so I thought I'd call it Phil Hurley and the Lost Pines. And I made a website, and I printed up business cards, and I got all this together and started gigging under that name. And one night, coming home from a show, I got this call from a really nice guy, and he was completely polite and personable. And he said, "Dude, I hate to tell you this, but I've had a band called the Lost Pines for the last 10 years." And I was like, I had to try to extract all of that. And thankfully, they were pretty patient with me, because once you put stuff on the internet, it's hard to get it all to go away.
It is.
So I never found another band name that I liked, so I just kept calling it Phil Hurley.
Phil Hurley. That's a good name for a band too.
Yeah.
So one thing that I came across that you've done in your past was some music for theme songs, movies, things like that. I think I saw something about you had something in Dumb and Dumber.
We
Maybe.
did. We had the single from the movie Dumb and Dumber back in the day. Yeah. So I had a band when I was young with my brother, and we all grew up together. It was a band called Gigolo Ants, or Aunts, I guess, depending on how you pronounce that word. And we had a good run. We had I started that band when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school, and 2 days after I graduated from high school, they had all graduated from college. And I was 17. We moved to Boston, and that first fall, we did our first show in New York City, and we opened for Soul Asylum and got a record deal. And so we started making records, and touring when I think I just turned 18 years old. And we ended up having the same manager as Nirvana, and we were on RCA Records. And of all of that, the most successful part was we had signed to Polygram Publishing. And the guys at our publishing division really believed in us. And they just went to work for us. So not only we had the movie in the Dumb and Dumber, we had the featured song, and a Kevin Spacey, Meryl Streep film called The River Wild. And then we wrote one for the Tom Hanks movie about the young man called That Thing You Do. I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was delighted to be a part of that. A Pauly Shore movie and a Kevin Spacey movie, and that stuff. I still get little checks, quarterly. They're not, it's not paying my mortgage, but that was 30 years ago, and I still get some
Mailbox
checks.
money's a good thing, though.
Yeah, and the really lovely part about that is, I left that band in the mid, I don't know, 96 or something like that. But for whatever reason, we're still really beloved in Spain. So last fall, all four original members, we just went and played to thousands in Spain, and like people singing along to every single word. It was like we were just looking at each other with tears in our eyes, because at this point, my brother, who's a bass player, is a school teacher, and the drummer is the principal of a school. They had moved on from playing music entirely, and to show up with that kind of response in a whole other country, it was really moving.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, that was lovely.
Follow up on that stuff. How is writing a theme song like that, or how's that differ from writing, say, an album track?
That was an album track. That was, it was a song that was on our album that the label chose. We weren't writing specifically with that one. For the Tom Hanks movie, do you know the movie I'm talking about? That's about the young band.
Yes.
That one, they actually did put out kind of a cattle call, and they said they gave it to a bunch of different groups and said, we want a song that sounds like it could have been a hit in the '60s. It has to start with drums, and we want it to be called That Thing You Do. And so we wrote a song called That Thing You Do. Actually, I ended up, after being in Gigolo Ants, I toured with a great band called Fountains of Wayne, and it was the bass player from Fountains of Wayne, Adam Schlesinger, who wrote the That Thing You Do song for the film. But our song, we had written a couple other songs that we contributed that just sounded like 60s hits. And there's one of ours that's on the soundtrack called Little Wild One. And so when they're playing in the pizza place early on, you'll hear our little song. And that was really joyful, because we approached it, instead of going into like a big fancy recording studio, we did it very bare bones. We did it more like a band in the 60s would have recorded, like a little 4-track. And so it had more of a primitive kind of 60s sound. And that was the one that worked for them, That was a joy.
That's awesome. We're kind of coming up on time, so generally the way we wrap up these interviews is, for the struggling guy or the starting out guy or girl or whatever that's starting out, what kind of advice would you hand to them?
Well, I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends in the last couple of years. Fall in love with music. But don't, if you're doing it because you think you're going to get rich and famous, go do something different. Go get a different job, because it's not really what it's about anymore. It's got to be because you love it, and there's nothing else in the world you'd rather do. If you're not dedicated to it that much, you're going to get hurt, because it's a tough gig. And it's not getting any easier. Audiences are shrinking, paychecks are shrinking. Just the general interest in live music is an uphill battle right now. But if you've got something to say from your heart, say it as loud as you can and as often as you can. Let
Absolutely.
people hear your song and don't be afraid. I know it's like, some young songwriters, when they get their moment, chicken out and play a cover song that they know that everybody's going to like. And I'm guilty of it sometimes too. You want everyone in the room to like what you're going to do. But if you got a song that's yours and you believe in it, unless you sing it, unless you share it, no one will ever know. So, take your shot.
That's right. Shoot your shot and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Various other answers we had from have been from anywhere from you know find a way for find another job to pay for the music career, or just do it and go give your best and learn what your sound is. So that's the question I like to ask. So
That's a question that we're all kind of searching for. Even folks I know who have been professional musicians for decades are all kind of going, whoa, what do we do? It's not getting any easier.
absolutely. Well, anything else that you'd like to tell folks before we shut down the
I just
clip
wanted to
here?
thank you so much for having me involved, and I really look forward to getting to play. I mean, Ely made a fan of me from the first time we played together. He's just such a genuine. The first time we played together, I looked, I was like, man, I feel like every song you're telling me the truth. I love his writing, so I look forward to getting to share a stage with him again, and I look forward to getting to come up and see where you guys are, and see what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate that, and we'll see you here in just about a week.
Excellent.
Thank you, Phil.